you might be ignoring the prerequisites, the base knowledge to be able to use acronyms, fancy acronyms like that. So you need to assume that you've always got a couple of listeners on each and every podcast that is still in the 101 place.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It is your host, Adam A. Adams. Welcome to the podcast on podcasting. And we have a good takeaway today, and it's something that you need to not do. What is it that you need to not do? Well, let me give you an example. I was listening to a client's podcast recently, and actually I've been listening to a couple of clients' podcasts because one of them got at the end of a year mark and they wanted to know, what do we got to do? What are we going to work on? So I listened and I offered feedback. I listened to their direct competitions podcast. I offered pros and cons of their show, of this other person's show. And I poured into them on what they should do to make sure that they can overtake the other podcast, because usually my clients want to have a really strong presence. And so that's what we do. And as I was listening to this client's podcast, they used a couple of acronyms or just inside jokes, for example. And I've got two examples that came directly from that podcast that I will share with you. One of them, they said the Wasatch Front. They said, I want to invest in the Wasatch Front, something like that. But they used the term Wasatch Front. Now, what is a Wasatch Front? Is it a beer? Is it a city? Is it a mountain range? Is it a cleaning of your chest? What is a Wasatch Front? And so the point is that it was an insider information, an inside joke, an inside information, some information you would only know if you lived in a certain area. The other thing that they used was NOI, and they throw it around like it's nothing. Now, you might know what a Wasatch Front is, and you might know what an NOI is. I don't know if you do or not. But as I was listening to this podcast of my client, I had to write those two things down and mention that basically here's two things. You never want to sound smart or educated just to sound cool. So if you use terms like NOI, IRR, BTG, BCG, whatever, there's so many different acronyms. You might use like an F16 or whatever. Like, who knows if everybody knows what all of these things are. So when you use, for example, NOI, if it stands for net operating income, then you would pause. Even if you know what it is, even if you've known what it is for a long time, you have a listener on the other end of the headphones that is perhaps, most likely, you've got at least a listener who's on the other end of the headphones that has no idea what NOI means. And so what you would do is you would always think about your avatar in terms of when they started. Write this down. I always want to think about my avatar in terms of when they started. A point to that is if you have an episode and it goes into some detail, and then later on you have a different episode and it goes into more detail, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, in my third episode about this subject, I'm going to not mention anything that I said in the first one or the second one, and I'm only going to mention level 301. Instead of going to the 101 class, the 201 class, and going straight to the 301, you might be ignoring the prerequisites, the base knowledge to be able to use acronyms, fancy acronyms like that. So you need to assume that you've always got a couple of listeners on each and every podcast that is still in the 101 place. So how do you talk to all of them? Here's an idea. You might say, I'm looking at the NOI, and if you hadn't heard of NOI, it just means net operating income. And in short, that means it's the total income that you have after all of the expenses that you spend. So you get some gross income, then you spend whatever you need on expenses, and what's left over is your NOI, your net operating income. So that's what we're talking about right now is the NOI of this one place. What is their net income? So you might go into that where now you've got 101 people that are listening and they're saying, oh, okay, I'm with him. I am with her. I know what they're talking about now. Okay. Then going to the Wasatch Front, the podcast is based in a city that's found in Utah. And there is actually a mountain range there that encompasses a couple of ski resorts and probably including a couple of famous ones like Snowbird. You may have heard of Park City. There's a lot of places that might be included in what's called the Wasatch Front. The Front Range in Colorado is the east side of these mountains. And then in Utah, it's on the west side of these mountains. So there's this range. And if you're in Colorado and only in Colorado, you might use the term Front Range or the Western Slope. If you're in Utah, you might use a term called the Wasatch Front. But the problem is when you're on your podcast and people are listening to you from India, Australia, Canada, Florida, New York, New Jersey, Texas, and many other places around the world, other countries as well, as you get into these details of Wasatch Front, your listener probably isn't going to know what that means. Yes, sure. You live in Utah. You're an influencer in Utah and you host events in Utah. And a lot of the people that have started listening to your show, you've met in Utah. And they know what IRR means. They know what CPA means. They know what NOI means. They know where the Wasatch Front is because they live there, because they've seen you. But unfortunately, in 10 years from now, when your podcast is bigger, there's a few people that listen to your podcast a year from now, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years from today. And they're not from Utah. They're not from Colorado. They're not from Texas. They're not from California. They're not from where you're from. Maybe they've never been there. Maybe they've never visited. And so if you say Wasatch Front, then you should change that and say something like, basically, all I mean is Salt Lake City, Utah, Salt Lake Metro. And then you would finish. Or you would say, if you're not familiar with the Wasatch Front, that is all of the cities, basically Salt Lake, south down to Provo and north up to Ogden. You might say something like that. And what that ends up doing is get your listener, and pay close attention to this, please. Pay close attention. What that does is it gets your listener to be able to say, I know what they are talking about. Because guess what? If your listener says, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I don't know what she's saying. What is she even talking about? How do I find this? I can't find this on the web. I can't find this on the internet. I don't have time. I'm driving. I don't know what that means. Well, guess what? A confused mind, write it down. A confused mind says no. A confused mind says no. If your listener is completely lost during your episode, they might not listen to you again. Now, I'm not going to claim to be smart or not smart. I'll just say we all have smartness in our own ways. And there's been a few times where I watch a show, I watch a movie, and I love it because I can kind of see what's going to happen. Of course, they set it up for you. And so you're like, oh, I wonder if this person's going to jump out of the bushes. I wonder if she's going to end up dating that guy. I wonder if he's going to win the race. And I think he will. Why would they make a movie of it? And it gets exciting because you can follow the story. And then there's other times where you don't really know what's going on with the story and you feel like you missed something. You feel like you might have not watched the last episode. Like, how come I don't really know what's going on? And what ends up happening to some of us when we get in that position, and by some of us, I mean probably most of us, when we get to a place where we really don't understand what's happening in the show, in the podcast episode, in the movie, we might decide to turn it off. We might decide the next time that we want to watch a show that maybe that show's not for us. I don't want to claim that I'm smart or not smart. I am a person and I am really good at some things and I'm really bad at other things. If I'm watching a movie and I feel like I can follow along with it, I'm probably going to keep watching it. If I'm watching a movie and I feel lost, or if I watch a show or a series and one or two of them end and I just didn't really know why I was there, then what would I do? Well, me, Adam Adams, I would actually probably pick a different show. The next time I was wanting to watch a show, I'd probably pick something that was easier to follow along with. And so you need your listener to be able to follow along with you. A confused mind says no. So if they are not following along, they're going to leave you. So if you throw around these terms like IRR, CPA, cash on cash, if you use terms like Wasatch Front, Front Range, or Western Slopes, and there's a lot of people that will listen, or any people really, if there's anybody who's going to listen and is going to be completely lost, not be able to follow along or hire you, then you're doing yourself a disservice, your listener a disservice. You're not serving your listener because you don't really understand what level they are, that they are on the 101 level. Sure, you've got some 201s and 301s, but a significant amount of your listeners 10 years from now, they're listening to episode 500, and that's the first episode they ever heard. They're listening to episode 1500. Can you imagine getting to 1500 episodes? You will get there. And as you get there, just remember to keep on the same level as your listener and help them to be able to feel like they're not lost when they listen to your show. I'll see you on the next episode. You're not alone if you're ready to either get your very first affordable microphone or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to some legit podcasting studio equipment. Because on all of the forums over the last few months, I'm seeing this all the time. Even my own personal clients that work with my team, they're ready to get that next microphone. They're asking us for it. Additionally, when I'm on discovery calls with potential clients, they're always asking for this stuff. Hey, what mic do you recommend? Hey, what lighting do you recommend? What webcam should I be using? So many questions. And so what we did, my whole team has put together a PDF so that if you're one of those people who is looking to either get your very first affordable microphone, or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to more professional podcast studio equipment, whether it's soundproofing or whatever, we've got you covered by going to growyourshow.com/PDF. And you can download the PDF for free, or right there on the webpage is everything that you would have and you don't need to download the PDF. Either way, just go to growyourshow.com/PDF, which will put you to the podcasting equipment that me and my team have personally vetted. I'll see you on the next episode.